This is a video on chapter 28.1, which deals with the introduction to the money market. As we know, there are different markets. There is the product market, where goods and services are exchanged. There is the labor market, where workers are hired. And then you also have a loanable funds market, where corporations and others go to borrow money in the banking system. And here we have a money market. So there is both a demand and supply of money. The interest rate is going to be the nominal interest rate. On our x-axis, we have the quantity of money. So we're going to look at the regular downward sloping demand curve. We're going to call this MD, the demand for money. We'll look at that first. So first of all, what does it mean, the demand for money, the money demand? So the money demand is the amount of money that people want to hold outside of banks. So the money that people want to hold outside of banks. So therefore, this money could be what you have on your person, your wallet, or in the house. So what is that contingent upon? Well, as the nominal interest rate changes, if interest rates are very low, then the demand for money to be held outside of the banks is very high. So if I only can get 1% from a bank in interest, well, my money demand when I want to hold outside the bank is going to be very high. For example, I may have $5,000 outside of the bank. I have a very low opportunity cost of holding money if outside of the bank. Suppose interest rates go up to 10%. So if there's a rise and increase in the interest rate, we move along the curve. At this point, I might have now a much greater opportunity cost of holding money outside of the bank. If I don't put money in the bank, I'm losing this 10% interest rate. So you can think of the money demand, what determines the quantity of money held outside the bank, it's really an opportunity cost. It's a cost-benefit analysis. You have some benefits of holding money outside the bank. For example, it's easier to make transactions. Cash is king. It's widely accepted everywhere. But there's also the opportunity cost of holding that money outside the bank, not having that money in the bank, and that is the interest rate that you lose. And it's the nominal interest rate here in this market because it's both the real interest and also the rate of inflation. So sticking with the money demand for money outside of the banking system. The question is, what changes the money demand? What causes this to shift? We know once again that it's the nominal interest rate. What causes a change in the quantity of money demanded, which means movement along the curve. But we want to look at why is it that there's an increase in the money demand? At any particular nominal interest rate, why is it that there certainly would be more money demanded held outside of the bank? What changes would affect that? Well, the first one is, these are the shifts of the money demand curve. These are external factors not relating to the nominal interest rate. So one of them is a change in the price level. We'll think, if prices go up, if things are more expensive, then what do you need? Well, if things are more expensive, you need more cash to pay for them. If the price of Starbucks goes up 20%, if you used to go in with $4, that was the previous price. Well, now you go into the store and you have the same $4. You can't get the good, so you have to hold more money, have that more money on you. So if the prices go up, That's going to cause the money demand to increase, as reflected in the graph above. The other one would be a change in the real GDP. Real GDP is output or production. So the assumption is if real GDP increases, there's more output, more production associated with that. You can figure there are probably going to be more transactions. More goods being produced, more goods being bought and sold, or more transactions. And doesn't that lead to an increase in money demand? Once again, is indicated by the graph above. A third one, it can work both ways. There's a change in financial technology. So if credit cards are more widely used and accepted, debit cards, e-money, well, that would actually cause money demand to go down. People would have to hold less money on them. I think what happens if those systems become riskier, or there's more credit loss and credit theft, if people think that credit's going to be taken, what they may do, they may actually hold more demand. So changes in financial technology can work both ways. So just to review, in the money market graph, we have the money demand curve, a change in the nominal interest is what causes a change in the quantity of money demanded, which means we move along the same curve. The external factors that cause a shift in the money demand curve are a change in the price level, a change in the real GDP, and if both those go up, then the money demand goes up. They're independent. If either one goes up, money demand will increase, and a change in financial technology depends which way it shifts. Separately from this, we're going to have to look at the money supply. Also known as the quantity of money. The question is, who is the supplier of money? Well, the Fed is the supplier of money. And you have to think here, on any given day, how much money is circulating in the economy. The presumption is, if money is circulating in the economy, somebody's holding it. Either holding on your person, at your home, or in the bank. It is not just sitting in a trash can or on the side of the road. So at any point in time, the money supply is actually fixed. Right now, there's a certain amount of currency that's in the economy. So if the money supply is fixed, what does that indicate? That will indicate it's independent of the nominal interest rate. It is perfectly inelastic. So if the nominal interest rate changes, the quantity of money, if there's $1 trillion out in the economy, interest rates can change, the quantity of money supply does not change. The Fed can cause things that we'll see that changes it, but it is fixed. Once again, the money supply, it's the quantity of money that's being held. So I want you to think, the money supply, it's the money that's being held. Somebody's holding on to that money. The money demand is the amount of money that people want to have outside of the bank, on the outside of the bank. So the money supply is what's actually being held. It's the money actually being held, whereas the money demand is the amount of money that people want to have outside of the banks. We're going to see that it's a change in the nominal interest rate in the short run that's going to bring back equilibrium in the money market. So in this scenario, at a nominal interest rate of 5%, let's say there are $1 trillion is the quantity of money, we have equilibrium. All right, so at 5%, is any equilibrium in the market, the quantity, in this case, of money supplied equals the quantity of money demanded. Don't forget what money supplied is. It's the amount of money that's actually being held. So 1 trillion is actually being held, and the amount that people want to hold is $1 trillion. Well, let's see what happens if we're out of equilibrium. Let's suppose the interest rate is 6%. So at 6%, what occurs? If we go across, at 6%, there's certainly a disequilibrium. At 6%, the money supply is greater than the money demand. So there is some type of disequilibrium. Let's just assume that at 6%, 0.8 trillion is the quantity of money demanded. So at 6%, the money supply is 1 trillion. The money demand is 0.8 trillion, 800 billion. Well, anytime supply is greater than demand, that's a surplus. So here there's also a surplus. There is, in this case, a surplus of money that's held. Again, people only want to hold 800 trillion, but they're actually holding 1 trillion. So they are holding too much money. So think of it, you have too much money in your wallet. You don't want to hold that much. So you want to get rid of the money. You want to convert out of the money. You want to go from money, you want to go to some type of financial asset. For example, you want to convert money to bonds. So how do we do this? Well, you would just go and you would buy a bond. Let's say with that money, the overall difference of 200 trillion, so $200 billion, the difference between 0.8 trillion and 1 trillion. $200 billion is extra money that you have. You don't want to hold that much money, so therefore you buy an asset such as a bond. And what's going to happen when bonds are purchased, the demand for bonds increase and the interest rate falls. I'll go over that on the next page, but to show you we're in a disequilibrium. People are holding too much money since money supply is greater than the money demand. Interest rates begin to fall. The money supply is independent from the interest rate, so therefore as the interest rates decline, the quantity of money held, now as interest rates are declining, people have a lower opportunity cost. They're not losing as much interest, so therefore the quantity of money held is going to increase until equilibrium is reestablished. Let me just go over the relationship with bonds once again. So if people are holding too much money, they buy a financial asset such as a bond. I think anytime you buy something, doesn't that mean the demand for that commodity increases? So if people buy more bonds, the demand for bonds increases. And for any normal good, if demand increases, doesn't the price of that commodity increase? There is an inverse relationship between the price of a bond and the interest rate. So if the price of a bond increases, the effective interest paid on that bond is going to decrease. So a quick example of that. Suppose you buy some bond, to show the inverse relationship. Suppose you buy some bond that's paying 5%. So this was bought on the primary auction. First time someone buys it. Let's say it's a 10-year bond. Let's say new bonds come out. There's a change in the market. And then say new bonds come out and they're now paying 3%. Well, you have an old bond that pays 5%. New bonds, if you're going to buy at 3%. You decide you want to sell your old bond. Well, the new purchasers, they have two choices. They're going to look at, should they buy the old bond, well, the old bond's paying 5%, or should they buy the new bond paying 3%? Well, clearly, for a new purchaser, anybody wants the high return. So the new purchasers, more of them want the bond paying 5%. So therefore, since more people want that bond, the price of the old bond can be sold at a premium. The price of the old bond, therefore, is going to increase. And if you notice what happened, so when the interest rate fell, went from 5 to 3%, as we can see, when the interest rate fell, what happened to the price of the old bond? The price of the old bond increased. And hopefully that explains the inverse nature between price of bonds and the rate. And lastly, we have money supply and money demand. Nominal interest rate and quantity of money. So suppose there can be, as we know, recessions, too slow economies, or too high inflation, too fast economies. So the Fed sometimes intervenes, or frequently intervenes, and changes the quantity of money. So suppose the Fed wants to increase the quantity of money. And the quantity of money, by that we mean the money supply. Well, of course, we know the Fed increases the quantity of money. Well, if it increases, doesn't that mean the money supply curve is going to shift rightward? Any increase in demand and supply shifts rightward. So this was our initial interest rate. This is our new interest rate. Well, in order for the Fed to lower the interest rates, what does the Fed have to do? The open market operation they have to do. Well, the Fed is going to accomplish this by buying bonds. They buy bonds in the open market from someone in the public, a person, a corporation, a bank. So if the Fed buys a bond is an asset that someone else has. So if the Fed buys my bond, I'm going to give them my bond, but doesn't the Fed have to give me money? Because they're buying my assets. Just like if I sell them my car, they're going to have to give me money for my car. So the Fed's going to give me money. So therefore now I receive, let's say I sold the bond $100,000, I receive $100,000. I take some of that money and I deposit it in the bank. The bank has more reserves. I think there's more money available, and as we'd imagine, the interest rate falls. So what's going to bring us back to the money supply is increased? Here we are at R0. We're at equilibrium when the money supply increases. In the short run, this is a change in the short run. If the money supply increases, it's the nominal interest rate that is going to fall and bring us back to equilibrium. Well, this looks good in the short run. The Fed can just lower the interest rates by buying bonds, increasing the money supply. I better put the arrow there. The Fed increases the quantity of money. And if they do that, the interest rates fall. It seems like everything is good. Well, this is the short-term analysis. There's also a long-term effects that we'll look at in the next section. If you're in my class, please do all notes in chapter 28.1 and all questions in those notes up through 28.2. You can stop at the beginning of 28.2.